I am here to bring light. It's about healing. Mind, body, soul. Don't ever settle. Find your purpose. Find the answers. Don't hold back. Achieve maximum success. Book with me if you want to live.
Welcome to Shinoken's world. Today I am honored to welcome Mr. David Icke. I first learned Mr. Icke from Mr. Liu Ota's seminar in 2008. I still remember the shock that I heard Mr. Icke's story. Mr. Icke was born in England in 1952. He was a soccer player around the 1970s and became a newscaster at BBC. During the 1990s, he has experienced spiritual awakening. He's pursuing a global conspiracy and deep human history since that time. Mr. Icke is telling us that this earth is governed by a reptilian, and also telling us how to end this control. Today, we'd like to ask him a lot of questions. Mr. Icke, thank you for joining us today.
It's not a problem. Pleasure.
Reggie, thank you so much. It is an honor to speak with you. I heard you came to Japan in 2002 for the first time by Mr. Liu Ota's invitation. Can you share us your experience in Japan?
Well, I was taken aback by how many people came. And Mr. Ota was an amazing man, an extraordinary human being. It was a privilege to know him. And I came again a few years later, and then was, sad to hear that he was no longer with us. But he was a very, very highly intelligent man and very well researched man. And it was a joy to know him.
Yes, I really love his video too. He mentioned about you all the time in Japan. He introduced you to the older Japanese audience, and he shared your spiritual experience in his video. Can you tell us about the story when you went to the bookstore, you hear the voice and pick up some book which was written by psychic healer?
Yeah, I had become a television presenter with the BBC, as you mentioned, when my football career ended with injury, or arthritis, actually. And you get on with your career and you say hello, good evening, and welcome, and all this stuff. But I was starting to become concerned at what we were doing to the environment. I'm not talking about global warming and all that stuff. I'm talking about I was seeing places I knew as a child being devastated by inappropriate development, etc. And I thought, well, how do we challenge this? And there was a party in Britain, a political party. It was known as the Ecology Party at one time, and then changed its name to the Green Party. And I got involved with that. And again, the story of my life, it's a strange one, really. It's that I will decide what I want to do, and then suddenly the synchronicity and coincidences of life put me in that position. And there came a time after a while, and it was at this point when I was getting involved in the Green Party, that I started to question. I thought, okay, you're a determined bloke, and you work hard for what you want to achieve, but that can't alone explain these ridiculous coincidences all the way through my life, going into football, everything, that have just opened the doors for you. And so I was starting to question what was happening to me. And then I joined the Green Party, and again, it was ridiculous. I started a party on a little island just off the south coast of England where I live, the Isle of Wight, because they didn't have one. And within a few days, or maybe a couple of weeks, we got a letter from the regional Green Party in the south of England, welcoming us to our creation, and saying, can you send a delegate to the next regional meeting in a place called Winchester? So I said, well, I'll go. In fact, one or two of us went, and we went, and we basically navel contemplated for an afternoon, and then right at the end, the lady said, who was hosting the meeting, our representative on National Party Council is stepping down today, so we need someone to take their place. Are there any nominations? Anyone who would like to do it? And the place was quiet, right? So I said, well, I'll do it if there's no one else. And so they had a vote, and actually 2 people voted against me, even though I was the only candidate. And I said, well, what does that mean now? What do I do? They said, oh, you represent the region on National Party Council. So 2 weeks later, this is only a month since we got the first letter. I go up to a meeting near Regent's Park in London of the National Party Council, and we navel contemplate all morning, coming to no particular conclusion. And then just before lunch, just to emphasize, this is just a few small weeks before since I started the party at all and actually joined. And the guy who's running it said, we're going to need some national spokespeople for the next year. So if there are any nominations, put them in over lunch, and then we'll go through them in the afternoon. And this guy came up to me while I'm eating me green lunch, and said, you're on the television, aren't you? I said, yeah, I am. Yeah. He said, you'd be confident in front of the camera, wouldn't you? I said, well, I suppose I would, yeah. He said, well, if you put your name forward, I'll second you, right? And so by 5 o'clock that afternoon, I'm the national spokesman for the British Green Party, which I've only I've only joined a matter of a few weeks. And this is the sort of thing that has been happening to me over the years. And so I thought at that point, there's something happening here. This is ridiculous. This is not explainable by the normal course of life. Mm-hmm. And at that same time, from the early time of what would it be, 1989, I started to have this experience where if I was in a room alone, I didn't feel I was alone. It was like there was a presence in the room. And all this was new to me, but there was an obvious presence. And so that continued through 1989. And in the summer of 1989, again, the synchronicity of my life, for the first time in political history, the Green Party in Britain, in the European elections, had a massive vote, about 2 million votes, which was far and away bigger than there's ever been. And that wasn't down to me or anything. It was down to a lot of environmental programs at the time, which were highlighting things. And so I was suddenly in the media again as a politician. And I'm like, pinch me, what's happening? but this presence got more and more tangible as 1989 became early 1990. And it reached a point where I'm working for the BBC and I'm in a hotel near the BBC main studios after I've done a program. And I'm sitting on the bed in this empty room. And this presence was so tangible that I spoke out into the room. I said, you know, if there's something there, would you please contact me because you're driving me up the wall. And a few days later, I'm just down the road from where I live on the Isle of Wight. And I was with my son, Gareth, who's now a strapping, you know, guy, but then was a little boy. I mean, I've been doing this for 35 years now. We were going to a cafe on the railway station on the seafront, but it was full. So we were going to go up into the town, and this railway worker, because there was a railway station on the seafront, came up to me, started talking to me about football, because you know that's some of what I did at on the BBC. And then after this chat, I noticed that Gareth wasn't there anymore, but I knew where he would be. He was going to be in this news shop right next to us, where he would be reading, you know, steam train books. Actually, we like steam trains in our family, and so I walked in, and there he is. He's reading a steam train book, and at that point, the atmosphere around me changed. I had no idea what was going on, but what I know now is the electromagnetic field around me changed, and it was like, what's happening? And then it wasn't a voice; it was a very strong thought form that passed through my mind, and it said, "Go and look at the books on the far side." And of course, I'm in a completely bewildered state. What's happening? And you know, my feet were being kind of pulled into the floor like an electromagnetic field, and I walked across to these books. Now, I knew this bookshop ever so well, and what it sold, because it's a seaside resort, what it sold were novels, you know, like romantic novels for the tourists who would sit on the beach reading the books. And so I thought, why am I walking across to these books? And I completely bewildered. And then I found them, and in among all these romantic novels was just one book. It had a woman's face on the front. It was called Mind to Mind, and it was I turned the book over to read the blurb, what it was about, and I saw the word psychic. Now, I'd never seen a psychic before, but it really hit me when I read that. When I read the blurb, I wonder if it was an autobiography by a professional psychic. I wonder if this lady would pick up what's been happening to me for the last year. So I read it in 24 hours and contacted her, went to see her. I went to see her the first couple of times. And what I told her, to give her no idea what was happening to me, I mean, she knew of me because I was on the telly, but gave her no idea what was happening to me. I said, look, I've got arthritis, and maybe your hands-on healing might help, because she did the whole, you know, energy exchange healing methods and stuff. And that's what she thought I'd gone for. Nothing more. So I went, and I'm sitting on a bench in her front room at the place not far from Brighton on the south coast of England. And I went the first time, and we had a nice chat, and second time had a nice chat. And the third and fourth time, only went 4 times, my life changed, basically. Not as much as it actually was changing, but I knew something was going on. But the way it did then change was like off the wall, a complete transformation in a very short time, really, over a year. So many things happened that just meant my old life was over. Anyway, she's doing the hands-on healing on my left knee on this bench and stuff, and I'm just sitting there kind of, you know, daydreaming. And then suddenly she launches her head back and says, my God, I've got to close my eyes for this one. This is powerful. So my backside is like slipping down the bench. What's going on here? It's all new to me at the time. And then she starts telling me that this figure that she can see in her head, which is just a projection, of course,
Mm.
was telling her that I was going to go out on a world stage and reveal great secrets, right? And I'm thinking, what? And that what quote, one man cannot change the world, but one man can communicate the message that can change the world. Message that's being communicated by many people now. And that basically my life was going to change. And one of the things that I was said at that time is that sometimes I will be guided to knowledge, and at other times knowledge would be put directly into my mind. And they would always be there to protect me in the face of enormous efforts to stop me, right? So all this is new to me. Imagine you've just gone into this front room and suddenly you're hearing this stuff. And of course, your conscious mind is saying, what? But something here was saying, you got to go with this. You got to go with this. And then what happened, to cut the story short, is that out of the blue, the BBC didn't renew my contract. This was about 2 months later. So suddenly I'm out of work. Unfortunately, I've always lived well below my means, so I had a bit of a cushion to keep going. And I was able to, for a few months at least, or best part of a year, just go with this synchronicity of my life. And what it was doing was leading me to lots of different people. Again, synchronistically, often you weren't looking for them; they came into your life. That were starting to put a picture together of the fact that the people that appear to be controlling the world are not the ones that are actually controlling it. And just to finish the story, what happened in the first 2 years from 1990, 91, 92, I would be led to information. And I've described it actually as like trying to put a jigsaw puzzle together, but some force is handing you the pieces and giving you a great idea where they go, makes it much easier. And I would look at the information and I would conclude from it how things were. But from about 1982, that switched in very much in line with what Betty Shine had said. I would first conclude what the situation was, and then tangible evidence, names, dates, places, people, all this information would follow that would confirm the initial, I think this is what's going on. And that's what's happened ever since. And, you know, I've put together like nearly best part of 30 books over 35 years by myself, basically, just following this synchronicity. You know, I'm not part of any group or organization. I just follow the synchronicity of life, and it plumps this stuff in my lap.
Amazing. And I was told that says your mission is to heal this world. And I read the book, Heal This World. It was a great book. And I think you face a lot of difficulty after publishing these books. And what kind of experience, difficulty have you faced after you published it?
Oh, well, when I first, because I was well known in Britain from television, when I first started talking about these things and what was happening to me, of course, I was massively ridiculed by the mainstream media and ridiculed by people on an enormous scale. Literally in the early 1990s, and for a few years after that, I couldn't, walk down the street without being laughed at by people in the street. You couldn't go to a pub or a bar because there was uproar. And what that did, again, I've said over the years that what life tends to give you is your greatest gifts, brilliantly disguised as your worst nightmare. And so that mass ridicule that I went through cleared me out of the prison that most people live in, which is the fear of what other people think. So when you fear what other people think, you lose yourself, because you are continually making the judgment of what do I say, how do I say it, and what don't I say, so these people won't think I'm crazy, right? Because of the massive ridicule I went through, where it either destroys you or it turns you into steel. I don't care if people ridicule me. I've no interest, right? If they want to ridicule me, then you go ahead. That's fine. That's no problem. My motivation is I want to know what's going on, and I'm not attached to what's going on in the sense of having a belief system originally that says I think this is how things are, like a religious belief system or a party political belief system or whatever. All that stuff went. I never had a religious belief system actually in my life, but all that went. And my only interest was what is going on. And, what I see in what I call the hijacked alternative media, and it has been since COVID, are people who have overwhelmingly right-wing political belief systems and almost as overwhelmingly Christian belief systems out of the United States. And what that means is there are certain areas where you will not go. You will not investigate Trump. You will not investigate people around Trump. You will not go into areas where maybe your Christian belief system may come under question, may come under challenge by the evidence. You won't go there. And what that means is there are great areas of potential research and knowledge where you will not go. And, I have always worked over these decades on a principle that was attributed to Socrates in ancient Greece, which is basically wisdom is knowing how little we know. To know, he said, or he's quoted as saying, to know is to know you know nothing. That is true knowledge. And of course, what he meant by that is, put in another way, whatever we think we know, there's always more to know. There has to be. And so what you do is, when you come to certain conclusions about what's going on, you know that there's more to know. So then the question is, what don't I know? And that drives you forward to continually push the cutting edge of what you know and go beyond it. Mm-hmm. And what happens if you have a rigid belief system, which will repel all borders, which is not for challenge in any way, is you won't go into those areas that will challenge it or potentially challenge it. And so you create like a myopia, like an eddy in a river, and the river's flowing past, but you're not interested in that, because if you go there, maybe this eddy won't look like you thought it looked. And this has put me at odds with great swathes of the rest of what they call the alternative media. When I started out, there was no alternative media. It didn't exist, just in a river. And it was literally a few disparate individuals who were asking questions that others weren't asking. There was no structure, there was no organization, nothing. And I watched it appear and I watched it grow, and I was absolutely delighted when I saw it happening. But what's happened is it's it's coagulated and solidified into a myopia that's basically focused on right-wing politics and Christianity, certainly in the United States and Europe too. And it stopped moving forward. So I've been challenging it on that basis because, you know, we've got to have the humility, surely, to know how little we know and to know how much there is more to know. And so what's happened in my life over the years is in the early 1990s, I started to see that the powers running human society weren't the powers that appeared to be running human society, that the real power was in the shadows. Mm-hmm. So I reached the point where, okay, these shadow people, who are they? And you go to the next stage, where you uncover the fact that there is a massive global secret society network, which has no borders. It operates in Japan as it operates in China, as it operates in South America, as it operates in Europe, as it operates in America. It's a global network. And that it has an agenda for the world, which is the constant centralization of power and eventually the removal of borders, and the centralized control of the world through a technocratic, unelected, centralized world government. And what's happened in the years since then, so many years since then, is that that's what's been unfolding in the world. More and more and more and more globally centralization of power. So then you ask, well, okay, this cult, as I call it, this global cult, hasn't been going for 5 minutes. So when did it start? Again, this is what it seems like, but what don't I know? When did it start? And you go back into the ancient world, you hit Babylon and Sumer and all these areas of the Middle East that came out of other areas of the world as well. But there's a real line that you can follow out of Babylon and Egypt through to Rome and into Northern Europe. And then across to America. And, you know, the British Empire was a massive vehicle for expanding this cult worldwide. Because when they gave, quote, independence to the former colonies, and it's not just Britain, Britain was the biggest one, of course, the most fundamental, but all these European empires, when they apparently rolled back, gave independence to the former colonies, they left out there the secret society networks and the bloodline families that have gone on controlling those countries ever since, but from the shadows. So people think they're voting. Oh, yeah, we're going to vote for this year. Well, what puppet do you want? You know, because that's what they are, puppets. And people are starting to see this more and more. That there is an awakening to this. And then I thought, okay, so this goes back into the ancient world, right? So what's the unifying, coordinating force that has spanned this whole period, what we perceive as history? Because, you know, people have been born playing a part in the advancement of this agenda, which is now reaching its centralization goal. Then they've died and others have come in, they've been born. And so you've had this ongoing contribution to this agenda. But, you know, that's not going to happen by accident. There has to be a coordinating force that covers that period, that's been orchestrating it. And that's when, from 1996, I started coming across people, again, in this most extraordinarily synchronistic way, who were telling me about an experience they've had. And I'm talking about all over the world. People who had seen, people that appeared to be human shift into a non-human state. You know, the central theme was into a reptilian state, but not only that, but a non-human state of various kinds. But the central one seemed to be reptilian. Okay, but then you say, all right, but what don't I know beyond that? And so where it's gone is I've just written a trilogy. The third book of the trilogy is coming out on September the 1st. It's called The Reveal. The first part of the trilogy was called The Trap. The second one was The Dream. That's the last book. And this one is The Reveal. And it's a trilogy. And it is basically where I've got to this point. And it's way, way, way beyond Trump or Biden or Harris. It's deep, deep in the rabbit hole. It's out of this dimension of reality. It's even beyond the whole reptilian level of it.
Wow.
And it's into the realms of consciousness, because if you think about it, it doesn't matter what form you take. You may have a Japanese body, you may have a white European body, you may have a black African body, you may have a reptilian body. But what dictates its behavior is the consciousness that's driving it. And so what I started to realize as I scanned all these different ancient cultures and belief systems was a real common theme. And that was because when I'm researching, I'm looking for patterns. I'm not necessarily looking for what people in different cultures and belief systems and religions disagree on, which is far less than people realize, but looking at what they agree on. We're looking at what the different holy books, for instance, agree on, what the ancient shaman, etc., agreed on. And that area of agreement is that there is a non-human force manipulating human society from the hidden. And then again, you have to research so many different subjects to put the picture together. And a real big penny drop happened for me when I realized, long ago now, but when I realized that when we look through our eyes or think we are, we're actually seeing not everything that exists in the space that we're looking at, but only a tiny, tiny band of frequency called visible light. And anything outside of that band of frequency, we can't see. So suddenly it starts to make sense when all these different belief systems agree that this human society, and what do we call human society? It's basically the realm of matter. But if you look at the realm of matter compared with the reality we're experiencing, matter is such a smear of what we experience. It's ridiculous. Matter is a tiny, tiny band. Basically, what matter is, it's that band of frequency that relates to the five senses and the touch senses and all that. Because 99%, some say 99.9% of the visible universe is not matter at all as we perceive it. It's something called plasma, which is called the fourth state of matter. It's a much more ethereal version of matter. And you start then to realize that this idea that we're being manipulated from the unseen is not only possible, but it can be explainable, because almost everything to a human is unseen. We're seeing such a narrow band of frequency. So when I started to look at this, and you've got the Christian Satan or the devil, you've got the Islamic Shaitan or Iblis, other names. You've got the Jewish version. You've got the Gnostics version of they call Yalda Bayoff. And what these are basically inverted, distorted states of consciousness that manifest through various means. So if this inverted, distorted consciousness, which Native Americans, or certainly the Cree tribe in the north of America and across into Canada, they refer, and other Native American tribes have similar names, but they refer to something called Wetiko. And Wetiko they call the mind virus. And basically what they're describing is what all these others are describing. And if you are subject to the impulses of this mind virus, this distortion, then you will express the distortion. And so you have the psychopaths, you have the warmongers, you have the people who love to hate and conflict and war. All this stuff comes from this distortion. And then you have this state of balanced consciousness, which rejects all that. And when they talk about the battle between good and evil, and you know, more and more people are seeing that that's the level this is working on. Basically, it's a tussle. I don't like battles and wars terminology, but it's a tussle between balanced consciousness and this distortion that wants to imbalance that balanced consciousness. And so we're a long way, like I say, from Trump or Biden, but what we're looking at being played out in the human experience within the five sense world is actually this tussle between these two states of consciousness. And the more that I've researched, and the Gnostics certainly believe this, the more that I've realized that this reality is actually controlled by that distortion. And that's what we're pushing back against. And this distortion, one of the things this distortion lacks, which is fundamental to understanding the world, is what we call empathy. It has no ability to put itself in the experience of those that are experiencing what it is forcing them to experience. And from a balanced consciousness point of view, which has empathy, that's your that's your fail-safe mechanism of your behavior. Because if you can have empathy for how you're making others feel and what you're making them experience, well, that stops you going there, because you've got this empathy. And what I would say to people, I've been saying it over the years, to understand this global cult and its operatives and agents, which are basically expressions of this consciousness distortion, people like Gates and Schwab and all these other people, Tedros at the World Health Organization, all these people, is to understand that they have no capacity for expressing empathy. They have no capacity for having the emotion of compassion. And thus, what I call empathy is the fail-safe mechanism, like I say, of human behavior. And if you don't have empathy, you have no limits. There is nothing you will not do to get what you want, because you don't have this emotional consequence of feeling the empathy that of what you're making others experience. That you have no emotional consequence. And so you start to understand how you can do what they do. They can manipulate wars. They can do what they're doing in Gaza. and they can orchestrate a quote COVID hoax to justify the infusion of a bioweapon into billions of people. You cannot do any of that or anything more that they do, hunger in a world of plenty. You cannot, as they're doing, target farmers and farmland, so you're reducing the amount of food that's being produced. All these things, and there are endless of them. You can't do that if you have a smear of empathy, and they don't. And to understand them is to understand that.
They're psychopaths, I think. So they
Yeah.
are giving us a fear, guiltiness, or those kind of negative, emotion to us, and to destroy our oneness. And how can we overcome this difficulty? Could you advise?
Well, first of all, it's to understand how the game works, what the game is. That basically makes you streetwise to what's going on. And then and that's essential. And unfortunately, what I call the hijacked alternative media has no idea what's going on. They're too focused on right-wing politics and their particular religion. But it's much deeper than any of that. It's interesting that what's happened since COVID is all these people have come into the alternative media and they've hijacked it because they get all the algorithmic promotion, all the financial promotion and all that. And basically they've created a myopia, which is a very, very narrow view of what's going on. And what that's doing as people start to awaken to the fact that the world's not like they thought it was, they're led to believe that this is what's going on, when actually this is what's going on. And it's breaking through those that myopia, that alternative myopia, into the greater picture to realize a number of things. One, we are not human. We are consciousness having a brief experience called human. And this is the area that I've really gone into since just after the turn of the millennium, and really into it in this trilogy. One day, about 2003, I mean, I'd thought about it before over quite a period, but then it really hit me. This reality is actually a simulation, akin to the Matrix movies. And what I got very, very powerfully, very strongly, is that this is a simulation, and what we call the speed of light is the limit of the simulation at this level, because there are other levels of it. And basically, it's a perceptual trap. We are trapped in this reality and other realities of the Matrix by believing that the simulation is real. By believing, for instance, that our version of God, whatever religion we follow, created this reality, this world, when actually this distortion consciousness actually created the world we're experiencing. I looked around at the time for anyone else that was saying this, and I basically only found one other person that was doing it, saying it in the public arena. It was different to what I was saying, but the theme was the same. And it was a guy called Professor Nick Bostrom at Oxford University, who was saying that he thought there was a very good chance that this is a simulation, and that it was created possibly by humans of the future. I don't buy that at all, but at least the thing was the same. And I started talking about it and writing about it. And what's happened since, particularly since about 2017, is more and more mainstream scientists are beginning to break ranks and say it actually does look like we're in a simulation. And if we are, then so many mysteries, I saw this back in the early 1990s, so many mysteries of science and physics will make sense if you realize what it is. If you think it's something that's organically, naturally evolved, then there's questions galore, and there's roadblocks galore in where you go with that. For instance, for this world to evolve to what it is from what they say it was makes no sense whatsoever in terms of the statistical chance of it happening, and the time scale as we perceive time of it happening. It makes no sense. And so, science talks around all these buffer stops and roadblocks, tries to make sense of them, but doesn't. But if you come from it's a simulation, it's and when I say a simulation, what do I mean? Is it a physical construct? No, it's an information source. And what's fantastic now is the technological world that's appeared with Wi-Fi and computers and AI and all that stuff. It is mirroring the simulation. It's basically another level of it. And so suddenly people like me have the analogies to explain what we mean all around us. I mean, how the ancient shamans and people in how they tried to, who kind of saw this in their own way, within their own cultural belief system, how they got that across I mean, where do you start? But of course they tried, and what happened is that they used analogies relating to their culture to try to explain what they were seeing. And then anthropologists go along and historians, and they take the symbolism literally, and they say, oh, these were primitive people. They believe this, they believe that. Yeah, but that's symbolic, not literal. I mean, of course, as what we call time passes, next generations can start to take it literally. That's what has happened. But initially, that was symbolic. And then I remember it was in 2021, April 2021, and a number of mainstream scientists by this time had come out. There was a guy called Rich Terrell, who in the computer department of NASA, who said he believed that we live in a simulation and that it's based on holograms. And it's exactly what I was writing all those years before. And on and on it goes. And one of the things, of course, that he said was that if it's a simulation, it means it's been created. So who created it? So now you're going down the non-human route. Everything's starting to come together. And I remember in April 2021, there was a guy who wrote an article for Scientific American. He was an academic, and he said he'd concluded that we live in a simulation, and that the limit of the simulation, he wasn't talking about other levels of it, which there are, but the limit of the simulation is the speed of light. And that's why the speed of light appears to be the fastest speed when it's not. It's absolutely not, provably not. And he was making the point that the whole idea of the speed of light relates to processing speed. He pointed out that if you're making a virtual reality game, which is symbolically, not even symbolically, it can be compared, obviously a completely different level of advancement, but it certainly compares the two. Then you can write the codes of the game, which dictate how the game's played. But you're still limited by your processing speed. And he's saying that's what the speed of light is at this level. And this is another interesting area too that I concluded back in the early 2000s, is that what we call the laws of physics are actually the codes of the simulation. Because if you're producing a virtual reality game, what you encode into it dictates how the game's played. It takes the limits of the game, what is possible and what's not possible within the game. And these are the laws of physics. So then again, we've researched so many areas. I started going into reading enormous numbers of accounts of near-death experiences when they've left the body, when the body ceases to function. And they've experienced a completely different reality out of the body, completely different, what we would call laws of physics, because they've left this level of the game. And so they've left the encoding of this part of the game, and therefore they experience a completely different reality. Then I started to realize I've been calling the body, the human body, since the 1990s, actually, a biological computer. And actually, I saw Elon Musk the other day in a post on Twitter refer to the body as a biological computer. I thought, whoa, how many decades is it since I started writing about a biological computer? There's a lot to know about Mr. Musk. He's not what he seems. But anyway, that's another interview on another day. But and he's not what he seems in not a good way either. But anyway, so I started to perceive the human body as the equivalent of a virtual reality headset. Because if you go onto YouTube or the internet and you put in a video search engine words to the effect of virtual reality compilations of reactions or whatever, you'll see these compilations of people. They're sitting in a room and they're in this reality. And then they put the headset on, and within seconds, they're jumping about, they're screaming, they're falling off the chair because of the information that's being fed to their mind. And when you think about it, when you're playing these, well, I don't, but when you're playing these virtual reality games, and especially the most sophisticated ones, you've got the headset, which is giving information through the sight senses. You've got the audio, you've got the gloves with the touch senses, you've got these chairs that move around with the game. And immediately, well, before I even say that, what are these games tapping into? They're tapping into the five senses. It's the five senses that are tapping into this matrix, this Wi-Fi. So I've got a computer in front of me, and if I had Wi-Fi here, I don't, but if I did, where is the Wi-Fi? Where would the Wi-Fi be in a place where there's Wi-Fi, which is almost everywhere now? You can't see it. It's outside of visible light. And what the Wi-Fi is, it's basically a radiation field that holds and stores information. And the computer locks into that Wi-Fi field and turns that information into a completely different form on the screen. When people say, explain the internet, what's the internet? And they talk about, it's graphics and videos and words, etc. on the screen. Well, yes, it is, but only on the screen. That's the only place the internet exists in that form. Everywhere else, it's Wi-Fi fields and it's electronic circuits, etc. So the computer is taking this information, it's processing it, it's decoding it, and it's putting on the screen in a completely different way. Well, I'm saying that the human body is doing that. It works like a headset. That when you enter this realm within the human form through the five senses can only tap into this narrow band of frequency. I mean, the sound senses and other senses can pick up a bigger range than the sight senses, but it's still very narrow. And what's happening, and this is mainstream science, is that the five senses are picking up waveform information, vibrational information, like sound waves, for instance, as a classic example. But the sight senses are the same. And the senses turn that vibrational information into electrical information, which is communicated to the brain. And then the brain takes that electrical information and forms it into a reality. And that reality is what we call the physical world. Mm-hmm. Because what matter is, and Einstein talked about this, matter is only a band of frequency within the energetic field, mm-hmm. that the five senses can interact with. So when the frequency gets higher and faster, it goes beyond the point where the five senses can interact with it. And in terms of sight senses, where it can be seen. So what we're seeing is this narrow band of frequency, which is actually the frequency band that we call matter. Because when you talk to scientists, what they'll tell you is that matter is made up of atoms. Mm-hmm. Okay, the solid world is made up of atoms. But when you look at an atom, it has no solidity. Mm-hmm. You know, it's a nucleus, and its electrons are, circulating the nucleus. But there's massive regions of what are, to our perception, empty space between the particles. And if you go deep enough in the particles, they're empty as well. And so when you go deeply into matter, and this is where quantum physics and stuff started to blow the minds of scientists, is there is no solidity. I mean, you can play a virtual reality computer game, the most sophisticated ones, especially if they're 3D. And we're closing in more and more on the point where you will not be able to tell the difference between the cutting edge level of virtual reality games and the reality we're experiencing, because this too is an illusion, just as the games are an illusion. And so we are looking at a situation where our perception of reality, the very foundation of our perception of where we are and who we are, that is the bottom line foundation of the conspiracy. Not Trump or Biden or Harris. The very foundation of what we perceive the world to be and our part in it, that's the real level of the conspiracy. And what I'm saying is that this hijack of the alternative arena is to hold the line in the political, religious kind of barricade to stop people going out here and then realizing the scale, not only of the conspiracy to enslave humanity by enslaving our perception. And if you can skew what we perceive we're actually experiencing, well, that's the biggest control system you can have. But it's also stopping people reaching this point of awareness that actually they are not human. And because they're not human, they are not subject to the limitations of human that they think they are. Because the world of the five senses is one of limitation. It's one of I can't. That's the way it looks. But when you realize that you are consciousness, an expression of one infinite field of consciousness, a unique expression, yes, but part of this infinite field of consciousness, and you are able to manipulate and dictate your own reality, you realize that all this this programming
Mm.
that says that you are just a little me human.
Mhm.
You have no power.
Mhm.
You are either a cosmic accident of evolution or subject to some dictatorial god,
Mhm.
and you have no power. What you have to do
Mhm.
is let your betters
Mhm.
run everything for you and tell you what to do and what to think. And so many people who have fallen for that, I'm just a little me, I've got no power. They look to these people in authority to tell them what to think. And what do they tell them what to think? What suits those in authority? And the other thing that happens is, because you realize that human is just an extraordinarily brief experience.
Mhm.
And actually, it's an illusion, it's a dream, it's an induced dream. That's what this world is. And if you realize that you, in terms of your consciousness, is eternal,
Mhm.
then this brief experience is not even that in your eternal exploration of forever. And so standing up for what you believe is right
Okay.
suddenly takes on a completely different view, because most people are not doing what they believe to be right.
Right.
First of all, because they think, well, what is right for me, not necessarily right for everyone. But they're thinking, what are the consequences for me of standing up for what I believe to be right? And if you perceive yourself as little me human,
Mhm.
then those consequences become massive and enormous and very frightening.
Mhm.
So you don't do it.
Right.
But when you think I am consciousness, and this is just a brief experience.
Mhm.
It's a brief experience for only part of my consciousness, not all of it.
Mhm.
And whatever happens to me, standing up for what you believe is right,
Mhm.
well, it's not that in my eternity.
Mhm.
So you do what you believe to be right, and you don't think about consequences. Because if you look at when people are asking the question, what can I do to make a difference to what's going on? The consequences start to be listed. If I do this, if I say this, what are the consequences for me?
Mhm.
And of course, eventually there's enough consequences on the list for you to say, I'd like to make a difference, but not that badly. Thank you very much. But when you make those, when you make that leap out of I am David Icke, born in Leicester in 1952, to I am infinite awareness, having an experience called David Icke, born in Leicester in 1952, then consequences not only are not listed, that you never even think of them
Mhm.
in the same way. I mean, you don't walk into traps and all that stuff. You're streetwise not to do that. But in terms of if you come from this point of what we call love, which is way beyond the human version of love, love does what it knows to be right.
Mhm.
It doesn't do what it knows to be right when there's no consequences of doing it. It just does it.
Mhm.
And it's not interested in consequences, because to take consequences into account
Mhm.
is for love to say, there are circumstances in which I will not do what I know to be right. Well, I don't think that love at that level does that. It just does what it knows to be right. So, I mean, for instance, I'm challenging this alternative media, and I'm getting enormous abuse from a lot of people for doing so. But if you believe it's right, then you do it. You don't think, well, I better not say this, because people will have a go at me. No, you say it because you believe it's right. And this is the difference between perceiving yourself as a state of consciousness, having a brief experience,
Mhm.
and believing you are that brief experience. And this is the point that we identify ourselves as human,
Mhm.
therefore we think that the human experience is what we are.
Mhm.
But the human experience is just that.
Mhm.
It's an experience. It's briefly experienced. We are the consciousness, ultimately eternity,
Mhm.
that is having those experiences. And it's a completely different way of seeing yourself. And, you know, my own experience is that when you ask the question, what do we do? Number one, we have to become streetwise to the game. And more than anything, streetwise to the nature of who we are. Because for me, the key is self-identity. It really is the difference between expanded awareness and myopic awareness. I have this phrase, what you believe you perceive and what you perceive you experience. That's the sequence. And what do we believe? We believe on the basis of information received. So if you can control the information, you control what people believe, you control what they perceive, you control how they behave and experience. And if you perceive yourself to be little me, just a human, 70 years and 10, as the Bible puts it, then your perception of reality and your self-identity is one of myopia, because you're seeing yourselves in those terms. And what that means is this energetic field of information, awareness, whatever, you are only tapping in to a tiny part of it, not because you have to, but because your myopic perception of self and reality is only tapping into that small area of potentiality and possibility. And so these people become the scientists, the mainstream scientists. They become the academics. They become the teachers. They become the politicians. They become the corporate leaders, these people. But when you transform your self-identity from I am human, that's all I am, to I am potentially all consciousness, and certainly I am an expanded state of consciousness, having a brief experience called human. What you're doing is your perception of self-identity is expanding, and as it does so, you're expanding into greater and greater swathes of this field of information, insight, awareness, and suddenly the world looks completely different. Your potential to impact on the world looks completely different. The fears of authority kind of fade away because you know they're illusions. And so it's, for me, in answer, it's a bit of a long answer, the long answer to the question earlier, what do we do? The key is becoming streetwise to the game, but the foundation of transformation is to redefine our sense of identity from I am little me human to I am infinite me consciousness. And that, I tell you from experience, transforms everything.
Thank you for the interesting story. It's already past 1 hour. I have to wrap up. I think you have another meeting, right? Coming.
Yeah, we should continue this at some point for sure.
Thank you.
I mean,
Please.
we've scratched the surface really, but there's a lot more to tell.
Yes, your story is always
someone else coming into this room to do another interview with about something else. So
okay.
Got to go, but we must do it again. Yeah.
Please come back to my show. And I'm currently, working with my partner. Her name is Miguel, and she also has a self-awareness. And I create the video. And if you're okay, can I send it to you and take a look at?
Please.
Thank you. And yeah, let me tell you one story. Your name Ike, meaning the grow love in Japanese.
Means grow love.
Yes, grow love.
Whoa.
You didn't know, right? Because
I didn't know that.
you're really a man of love, and I wanted to thank you for the humanity and appreciate it for your help. And please, come back to my show again.
Oh, I look forward to it. Yeah, there's a lot more to talk about.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ike.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye now.